You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and today, on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, we are diving into the NFC South and ranking the offenses within the division. Just the offenses, not the defenses. We're going to talk quarterback rooms, wide receiver rooms, running back rooms, all that good stuff, offensive lines. So I want to hear from you all. Fire away in that comment section down below. Let me hear your thoughts, your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements. How would you rank the NFC South and their offenses here? We're pretty hot off the heels of some massive quarterback retirement news that'll affect the Saints and what they look like in 2025. So, of course, we'll discuss that and plenty more. So let me hear from you all. But without further ado, like I said, NFC South offensive rankings here. We're going from number 4 all the way up to number 1. And at the very bottom, unfortunately, Saints fans, I have you at the bottom of this totem pole here. And there was a lot to consider with this. Even, and I'll say this, before Derek Carr even announced his retirement, I was kind of going into this with the anticipation that he was probably not going to end up playing this season, and if he did, it would be like maybe he pops up week 16, 17, 18 if he's ready to go. But I was already kind of operating under the assumption that Derek Carr was not going to be a part of this offense in 2025. So now you're staring down the barrel of Derek Carr's retirement, and you can see up on the screen right now, Ian Rappaport breaking the news. Saints quarterback Derek Carr, dealing with a shoulder injury that requires surgery that would knock him out for the 2025 season, is retiring per the insiders. While Carr tried an injection and rehab, it wouldn't allow him to be 100% until another procedure. So both sides are moving on here. A lot to digest and go into with this. The quarterback room. Tyler Shuck, the second-round selection that they brought in during the 2025 NFL Draft. Spencer Rattler, who they brought in during the 2024 Draft in the 5th round. And then, of course, Jake Haener, who they brought in the 4th round of the 2023 Draft, will now all battle it out in a wide-open quarterback competition now as we move forward here. And I've got to say, I'm not super excited about this. When you look at Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener specifically, going a combined 0-7 as starters last season, in combination with a Tyler Shuck selection that I don't really want to sit here and act like I'm some draft analysis expert or anything like that. This is just kind of what I've gathered from reading the room. And while Tyler Shuck is an intriguing prospect, for him to be thrust into the starting position, because I'm going to assume that he probably ends up winning this quarterback competition when you already kind of know what you got in the two guys that are sitting behind him in the pecking order at this current moment here, just considering the draft assets you've given up for all three of these guys over the last 3 years. I don't really know if I'm super excited about this. And I also have other concerns surrounding this Saints offense here. I will say I do like the way that New Orleans addressed the offensive line this offseason, specifically the left side here, as it looks like Dylan Redunz is going to be filling into the left guard spot. You, of course, get Calvin Banks Jr., who can slot right in at the left tackle spot from Texas as well. So you're feeling a lot better about the left side of your offensive line. You're hoping that Talise Fuaga will flourish in year number 2 on the right tackle spot. You got the interior of your offensive line back and healthy after last season, dealing with a ton of injuries on the interior of that O-line as well. So, I feel good there, but then you look at the skill position players and some big names, don't get me wrong, but there's also question marks surrounding them as well. I mean, you look at, of course, the concussion concerns surrounding Chris Olave. You hope, you pray that he winds up staying healthy through the duration of the season, and we don't have any sort of situation that we've already experienced with him prior. And then you look at Alvin Kamara. All reliable, going into his age 30 season. I mean, the guy is an absolute playmaker. Do not get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and act like I sleep on Alvin Kamara and I do not respect his game. Believe me, I do. But if there's one thing that has me concerned, if there's any ability you want to have in the NFL, it is availability, and that is something that has kind of plagued Alvin Kamara over the last handful, or honestly through the duration of his entire career. He's had some monster seasons, don't get me wrong, but when you look at the last 4 regular seasons, and I kind of went back to just when the NFL jumped to 17 games per season here, he's only started in 49 of a possible 68 games here, so he's missed almost 20 total games possible through the last 4 seasons here. You're basically averaging about 5 games a year missed. And that's just kind of an issue. And yeah, that number is a little bit inflated because you go back to 21 and he missed a handful of games that season. So that number does get a little bit inflated. It's more closer to like 3 games a season or so over the last 3 years. If you want to look at it that way, that's fine. But health is a concern around a lot of different spots. And this was a team that coming into the offseason, I really wanted to see just kind of hit the reset button and turn things over. And it felt like they were just kind of kicking the can down the road. They were restructuring the Derek Carr deal to make sure they could keep him around for another season. And they were operating prior to this injury knowledge that he was going to be their guy. So I'm just not in love with what the Saints have going on. And this is a team that I've desperately wanted to see just kind of hit the reset button and stop doing the kick the can down the road with the contract extension thing that they're doing, just putting on all these fake years on people's contracts so they can get under the cap space every year. I've wanted the reset. I want to see New Orleans competitive, and I really hope that if things maybe go well enough this season, they're still willing to understand that they need to kind of turn over some of this roster and some of the aging guys that they have, more so on the defensive side than the offensive side, but there is some guys on the offensive side as well. But ultimately, I just need to see the reset from this team here, and I don't feel super confident with the quarterback spot at all. So while I do like some of the roster construction that they have, and I'm interested in seeing how the O-line looks this year because I think it should be better than last year, especially healthy, you're looking at Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, or Jake Haener. So, I mean, you're going to need Shuck to surprise a lot of people if he winds up being the guy. And if he gets beat out by one of the other 2 guys, that's kind of a bad sign as well. Because, again, 0-7 as starters last year. Granted, they weren't the guys going into the season. So maybe going into a season as the presumptive starter would help either of those 2. But way too many questions for me to like with the New Orleans Saints here. Looking at number 3, and I've got to say, there is a lot to be intrigued about with like the number 3 and number 2 spots within this division here. But ultimately, I do like the talent of the team I have at number 2 a little bit more. So I ultimately settled on the Carolina Panthers going into that number 3 spot for the division here. Now, I will say this. I'm a big fan of what the Panthers could potentially bring to the table this season with the addition they made in the wide receiver room and an addition they made in the running back room. Ted McMillan, depending on who you talk to, was considered one of the best wide receiver options, if not potentially the best wide receiver option in this year's draft. And I think pairing him up with a first-round selection you made in Xavier Leggett last season is going to be it should be monumental for that wide receiver room. You've gotten significantly younger and you've invested first-round picks in what you hope to be first-round talents who will wind up being perennial playmakers for you for the foreseeable 5 to 10 years on your team. Couple that with the fact that you have the ageless Adam Thielen, who no matter how old he gets, is continually making plays year in and year out, and you have to appreciate that. And while maybe he works a little bit more on the inside than anything now at this point in his career, he still can make plays on the outside of the football. So you have a really solid group of 3 guys to work with as far as the wide receiver room is concerned. Chuba Hubbard has done an excellent job in snatching that running back 1 role, and he ultimately kind of made the Panthers comfortable enough in some capacity to move on from Christian McCaffrey, because they were together in that running back room before they moved on from him there. And he's done a good job in that absence of Christian McCaffrey. You go out and now you get yourself Rico Dowdle, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last season himself. There's a lot to like about the skill room. Offensive line was pretty good last year, especially in pass protection. You look at the number of sacks, 36 on the year, and this is where I think you really just kind of have to turn your attention to Bryce Young and how he fares in this season. Now, obviously, last year, bit of a wild year. Starts off the season as a starter, gets benched for a handful of games. I think it was like 5 or so that Andy Dalton got the start for. He ultimately eventually has to get pulled out as well, and ultimately Bryce Young gets thrust back into the starting spot. And you had a handful of flashes. You got like the first round talent flashes that you were drafting him for a handful of years ago. So at this point now, you just have to look at Bryce Young and go, can you make that next leap that you need to make as a first-round selection, as one of the top picks in your draft class? Can you turn around and be that guy for this team? There are some things that have me a little concerned because, like I said, I talked about the offensive line last year. It was actually a pretty formidable unit, all things considered. However, They did look a little bit worse when Bryce Young was under center than when Andy Dalton was under center. And that has to do with the fact that Andy Dalton had one of the fastest release times in the NFL last season, crazily enough. What is he, 36, 37-year-old Andy Dalton, however old he is at this point here. The guy was literally playing quarterback as a rookie when I was like in high school, if I'm not mistaken. It was like when I first got into high school. So, I mean, the guy's been around, but he was really effective in the pocket. Basically, you're looking at a 1 sack more per game difference from when Bryce Young was under center to when Andy Dalton was under center. They were averaging about 2 sacks a game while Bryce Young was under center, and they were averaging about 1 sack per game when it was Andy Dalton. So getting the ball out quicker, making quicker decisions, just knowing where you need to go with the football ahead of time kind of thing. A lot of it's going to be a part of the mental processing of the game for Bryce Young here, but I at least like the bones, and I like what this team overall could potentially possess going into 2025. But a lot of it falls on the shoulders of Bryce Young and him taking that next leap forward. If he's able to do that or not remains to be seen, obviously. But as of right now, I'm definitely interested in what we get here, because if things go well, this could be a solid unit going into 2025, and maybe they take a good step in the right direction, and they're, maybe flirting with battling within this division here, because it hasn't taken a lot of wins to win the NFC South over the last few seasons. So it's not like you have to win a ton of games to get yourself into a playoff spot playing out of the NFC South. This division has been relatively close and has not required a lot of wins for the last handful of years, I would say, basically since Tom Brady left. Moving into the number 2 spot, and like I said, did a little bit of juggling with number 3 and number 2. And even number 2 and number 1 a little bit once I kind of settled on who my number 3 was, because I do think that there is a case to be made for who belongs where when you look at these I guess 3 teams within the division, because I kind of have the Saints as a dead last team at the moment. Number 2, we're going with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, it really all comes down to Michael Penix and what he can do with this offense here, because when you look at the surrounding talent, the Atlanta Falcons are one of the most attractive offensive teams in the NFL on paper. Cannot stress the on paper enough. That is where this all starts to come together here. You look along the offensive line, I feel really good about the unit that they have there. They have a handful of first-round selections there. Jake Matthews still protecting that blind side since 2014. But then the skill players themselves, Drake London, coming off of a quietly strong 2024 season where he racked up over 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns, just missing the double-digit touchdown number. Bijan Robinson had himself a monster of a campaign, and the only reason more people don't talk about it as much is because obviously Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry had these monumental, historic seasons as a 1-2 bunt punch battling at the top of the running back rankings all last season. But I mean, Bijan Robinson, nearly 1,900 yards total from scrimmage, rushing and receiving, coupled with the 15 total touchdowns that he had. Bijan Robinson last season looked like the first-round talent that you drafted him to be, and then some. If he continues to get more involved in the passing game as a receiver, and on top of that is allowed to run through the open lanes the way he was this past season, I think that you're going to see another step forward. Bijan Robinson has the playmaking ability and one of the most complete skill sets as a running back in the NFL. If you continue to find ways to get him the football, I think it's only going to benefit a young Michael Penix Jr. Of course, I love the idea of what Kyle Pitts brings to this offense. It's just a matter of us seeing him kind of recapture that magic of his 1,000-yard rookie season. I would like to see that combined with a handful more touchdowns, but I love the size mismatch, athleticism mismatch he brings over the middle of the football field. You just want to see all of that be put together into production. And then Darnell Mooney, you could even throw him into the bag of equation here, because when you look what you brought him in for, it wasn't a ton of money, but a lot of people, I remember this signing specifically, me being a big fan of it, but a lot of people outside of Atlanta kind of pointing and laughing, Darnell Mooney's not good at football, yada, 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 but he was unbelievably productive when he wasn't thrusted into the number 1 wide receiver role in Chicago. And then you look at what he did last year as a compliment to the amount of talent you have on this offense. In, of course, Drake London. In, of course, Bijan Robinson. He's basically your number 3 option, and he was 8 yards shy of 1,000 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns. You could not have asked for much else from Darnell Mooney for what he brought him in for to be in this offense here. it really all does just come down to what you are going to get out of Michael Penix Jr. And from the small sample size that we got last season, I definitely think there's a good reason to be excited. And honestly, hindsight is obviously 2020. You went and you spent all that money to bring Kirk Cousins in, and I'll be very curious to see if he even is on the roster come the start of the season. I know ownership has been very upfront about the fact that they're not moving him and he's going to be on the roster. And I get that. You don't want to pay a guy to go play somewhere else and potentially, maybe make you regret ultimately letting him go. I don't know if Kirk Cousins can do that at this point here. He did kind of look like a bit of a statue in the pocket last season, but he will be further and further removed from that Achilles injury. So, I mean, I really wish we did get to see Michael Penix from the jump right out of the gates week number 1. I kind of feel the same way about Drake May last season, although, I mean, him being under center less with the regime they had last year probably would have done him more good than harm. So who knows? But in the Atlanta Falcons situation, I almost wish we got Michael Penix Jr. week number 1, and I wish that the Falcons kind of didn't go out and bring Kirk Cousins in, because you have to wonder how much further along he would have been had he got the start from week number 1 and not get thrusted into the fold once you got to, I forget what it was, like week 7, 8, 9, whenever it was that Michael Penix finally got the okay to get into play because the Kirk Cousins experiment was just failing. I would have really loved to see how he would have looked coming out of the gates initially right off the jump, because we did see some really good flashes. We saw some rookie mistakes, but unfortunately you're so far into the season at that point, it's hard to really get a gauge on what things could have been like if he was just given the reins right from the jump. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, the final team remaining within this division here, you are looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I've got to say this. The Eagles are kind of doing the same thing with basically just running it back with the same offense as last year. The Buccaneers are somewhat doing that as well, other than just bringing in Emeka Egbuka in the first round, who I think is going to be a phenomenal addition to this wide receiver room, especially as there is, of course, the uncertainty surrounding Chris Godwin and just how quickly he's going to come back from the injury he dealt with last season, and just how effective he's going to be on top of that. Like, how long is it really going to take Chris Godwin to get back to being his old self? And ultimately, a little slightly darker question is, does he even get back to his old self kind of thing? So I really liked that addition of him, and it makes a lot of sense attacking wide receiver. I know some people were thinking edge rusher, myself included, but I mean, as far as the current state of the wide receiver room goes, I understand the thinking surrounding that selection there. But I mean, you're looking at Emeka Egbuka and Mike Evans at worst, plus Chris Godwin's in the best case scenario, just kind of terrorizing opposing secondaries. Then, of course, you have an offensive line that is really good in my eyes. You got a really good group of high selections there, first and second round picks here. The only guy that you went and didn't grab yourself is Ben Bredesen, who's the only person that you brought from the outside in, but everyone else is just draft picks you've homegrown for the last handful of seasons. I love and respect what Cade Otton does with the no gloves thing. It's a throwback to Dallas Clark in my eyes. I do think that's an area that could maybe see a little bit of an upgrade as far as tight end is concerned. There are some times where I go, if Cade Otton was just a little bit better, I really, really like this offense. And then you have like the running back room, which honestly makes me wish that, and as much of a gamer as Baker Mayfield is, don't get me wrong, because I'm a huge Baker Mayfield fan. I cannot stress that enough. Not a Bucs fan by any means, but I am a massive Baker Mayfield fan. I will say this. The running back room in Tampa Bay makes me want them try to balance out their attack a little bit more, or even maybe just lean more rush first, pass second, because their running back room is unbelievable. Bucky Irving last season, coming out of the 4th round for this team, incredible production, and you could not have asked for more. I mean, you're looking at 5.4 yards per attempt, 1,100 yards, and 8 rushing touchdowns as a 4th round pick. Of course, beating out Rachaad White as the season went on for that running back 1 role. Then you have again, Rachaad White's your running back 2, and then your depth goes even further. You had that monster game from Sean Tucker as well, rocking the number 44. And again, I'm not saying this offense isn't balanced by any means. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I mean, 56% of your offensive plays were pass plays, so like you're pretty close to 50-50. I just want to see you give that football to all 3 of those running backs a little bit more. Maybe push that number just a little bit closer to 50%. maybe flirt with the idea of 51 run, 49 pass. I really, really like what you're doing in that running back room, and I think you could really take advantage of some defenses that are starting to reel right now as the running game makes its return. It's happening all around the league. We just watched a team like the Philadelphia Eagles basically battering ram their way to a Super Bowl victory through the running game. Now, I get they have Saquon Barkley, but Bucky Irving is a pretty damn good running back in my eyes, and I think you have the depth in that running back room to really beat up some opponents. But again, I also love what Baker Mayfield does. I respect his game. Dude's an absolute beast of a gamer, whether he's running with the football, throwing with the football. He's got that gunslinger mentality that I really enjoy watching. He'll throw an interception or two and then go and throw you 4 touchdowns. Like, he has that quick moving on type of memory, just kind of forgets about it and keeps going forward. So I love what this offense brings to the table. I probably sound like a Buccaneers fan, but I promise you I'm not. I just really like what they've got brewing over there in Tampa Bay, and for good reason. I think that there's a reason why this team, although things got a little bit rocky towards the end of the season with controlling their destiny or not, because they kept dropping games that they should not have dropped last season. But this is a team that, for a good reason, has been consistently winning this division as of late. I think it's Tampa Bay's division to lose. I was saying a lot of that last year as well. I'm going to hold firm on that right now, and I think a big piece of that is just how much upside this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense has. So we'll see where everything rounds out, but that's what I'm looking like. Tampa Bay at the top of the NFC South. But fire away in that comment section down below. Let me hear from you all. Your thoughts, your opinions. How would you rank the NFC South offenses? Remember, that's all we were talking today. No defensive talk. So let me hear from you. Let me hear your thoughts. But as always, you made it to the end. I greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.